Hey, Husker fans. Evan Bland with Sam McEwen, the Omaha World-Herald Pick 6 podcast coming at you. This is a two-man podcast today, unless Tom Chattel possibly rolls in as he's known to do on occasion.
We had breakfast with Tom this morning.
We did. We had a good time. He was all dressed up from our Big Red breakfast today.
It was classic.
That's the establishment that we ate at, he was overdressed for, but that sort of added to the fun. Anyway, this is Game 2, Nebraska football season, home opener.
These are some dulcet tones for a program that's on fire, my friend.
Yeah? I mean, what do you want? Game 2!
It's gotta be.
They're at home!
You gotta be you.
You're 0-1.
That dulcet tone.
Oh, my goodness.
You're
I mean,
down.
we could freak out. Should we freak out?
Well, I'll do a little freaking because I think I'm trying to mirror the fan base. No, I mean, we'll talk. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk about what's up.
Yeah. Well, we're going to hit on the game. I want to talk a little bit about the psychology of the program right now, too.
Yeah.
Coming off that kind of a game. And then the next 2 weeks, what's there to gain? What can we look for in these next 2 weeks, assuming Nebraska wins them, leading up to the Oklahoma game? What's that going to be like? But first, you're back from Ireland. Let's hear an Ireland story. You traveled a long way. What was it like? What was a highlight?
There's so many highlights, Evan. I really liked it. I mean, I thought it was a really cool place. I did not go to all of Ireland, right? So I went to Dublin mostly. So the city, and then there's a park outside of Dublin, and that's mostly what I was able to see. So I didn't get to all the other parts, Cork and Cherry, and I don't even know the names. Anyway, Dublin. Dublin is unlike any city I've ever been to. It's a sort of interesting mix of old, very old, and very old and kind of a cool vibe. It's hard to explain. People are laid back there. It's kind of edgy. A lot of people there just kind of have their own style, their own personality. So that part of it was neat. It felt like an international city, but it didn't feel like an international city that was going real fast. It felt like everybody was kind of going at the speed that they wanted to go at. The weather was amazing. The buildings were ancient and cool. It's like they tucked a little, what we would call here a bodega, but they're a pub or a bar or a restaurant in every little possible corner they could. Then you'd walk, and you'd walk like 4 or 5 blocks, and then boom, you'd hit a park. And it would be kind of like a square park and they were all, made so long ago that the parks have a more defined shape than the streets. It's almost like the parks were what they kind of figured out first, and then they built around them. And so the people in the parks everybody just hangs out. And that is, like a little bit different from a park here where there's like a purpose. You go to a swing set, or you're going to go cook out. People would just sit in the grass and they would play cards, or they would, talk. A lot of people smoke there. Vaping, smoking. There's a lot more of that, I would say, than there is here, and probably more of it than you'd see in some major American cities. So that was pretty common. And then the beers. It's not just Guinness.
You wrote a great story about the Guinness pool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not a big beer guy, as you well know. You've traveled with me a lot, so I don't drink a lot of beer. But it was cool to go there, and I didn't get drunk or anything, but I had a lot of beer there because I felt like that's part of it there. The beer and the food kind of go together. The food is about a B+. I would say American food in America, not necessarily American food, but food in America is an A+. American food you can get almost anything here, and people here, food is sort of a pastime here. So, as a portly gentleman, which I am, there's more fat people here than there is there. I'll say that. And so, food there is probably about a B+. On some of the road trips we've been on, Miami was an A+. Nashville was an A+. Like, there's been other A+ trips that I've taken where it's just unbelievable. But the beer there is it. I mean, that's the liquor, the alcohol. That's a big focus. So Guinnesses are made a specific way. I assume they make them here that way too, but everybody was a little bit different. So I had them, I think, in 3 or 4 different spots. Some of them wait the 119 and a half seconds between the pulls. Some of them go a little longer. Some of them go shorter. So there was a little bit of a difference in the way that they served them. They had other stouts there. One place that's very popular as a restaurant didn't serve Guinness. It served this other one, Wick Smith's, as they call it. And then they have a bunch of lagers. So beer's a big deal there, and whiskey's an even bigger deal. Amy Just, who works for the Journal-Star, Husker Extra, she did the whiskey tour, and whiskey's a big deal there. So they have all the bottles, and they kind of store them in like interesting ways. And they have so many different versions of Jameson and so many different versions of Teeling. And so, like, consumption is part of what you do there. And then we went to Trinity College, and we saw one of the oldest colleges around, and the Book of Kells, which is 1,000 years old at this point. And then after that, we went to the pep rally, which was cool. Best statue I've ever seen is the Oscar Wilde statue in Marion Square Park. I don't know if you should look it up. You'll understand why when you look it up. Why it's cool. It's great. And they also have this place where you can write down sayings that Oscar Wilde had. And then I went and watched a cricket match, which I've never seen. I've never seen a live cricket match before. So I went and watched that for about an hour and a half.
So the statue's built into this boulder, and he's leaning against it.
And it's got, and they put color in it.
They've got color on the jacket, yeah.
It's
a green
like a velvet
jacket.
jacket, yeah.
That's cool. So, and then the stadium
And there's
was...
statues everywhere. So, like, I wrote 2 stories next to statues. Like, there's statues all over the city. All over. There's James Joyce. There's... The most famous statue is Molly Malone. And it's a newer one, but that's a famous statue that's, like, right outside one of the currency exchanges. And people just take pictures next to it. The statues are a big deal there. You can tell.
And the stadium was unique, right? In the sense that parts of it were, like, too low for a football game. And then parts of it, like, there were just a few rows of seats because it was adjacent to a neighborhood?
One of the nicest stadiums I've ever been in. No question about it. Obviously, they had issues on game day that they need to fix, which I assume they will. But one of the nicest stadiums I've ever been in, no question. As you envision what it would look like to remake Memorial Stadium, there are aspects of Aviva Stadium that you would take. The quality of the sight lines was amazing. The low side actually worked. It did make it look like a bedpan, but it worked. Like, it was really effective in the way that it made the place look visually. They found a way to block a lot of the wind out of there, and I think that's a good thing. If you can find a way to have ambient's the wrong word, but natural environment without the wind element effing with your game, I think that's just about ideal. You want the cold, you want the heat, you want a little bit of rain, but if you can take a 30-mile-an-hour wind and take it down to 7, it just makes the game better in a lot of different ways. And so I think they've done that. They've done that in tennis, in all the major tennis majors. They've now gotten away from the sport, wreaking havoc at the U.S. Open with the wind blowing around. So they found a way to do that there. They need to do it in football. Game day was rough for the stadium personnel. They just gave away all the beer and the food. So each person got 2 drink carriers worth of beer. And by drink carriers, those little styrofoam four carriers.
Little 4 carriers, yeah.
So you could get 2 of those, but most people were not getting 8 beers. They were getting 6.
Oh,
because
wow.
it's hard to carry 8, because you tuck one up against your arm, and then the other one would be out a little bit so you could balance it. And so a lot of dudes were getting 6.
So you can put
I saw one with 7.
Caddy corner, yeah.
I saw one with 7. And they had these big hot dogs they were just giving away. The food ran out first, actually.
Wow.
Because they were giving, I don't know how much food they had, but they were giving away 3 or 4 fry cups to each person. You got 3 or 4 fry cups, and then you got 3 or 4 hot dogs. The food's interesting there. They don't use a lot of spices. That's why I'd say it's a B+. It's not a spicy city, and I love spice. So their potatoes, their chips, as they call them, they tasted like potato. Like really potato. And their sausage was very sweet. It reflected the sweetness of the ham that they use, or the sweetness of the back meat of the pig and all that stuff. So eating there was like eating the thing without the spice. So you realize why people, like spices, or at least I do. But I loved it. It was great. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's a beautiful city. And again, the people are the biggest thing there. They're nice, they're not overbearing, and they're themselves. Does that make sense?
They're not putting on a show for the tourists. They're just
No,
they are who
but
they
they're
are.
also just they're very expressive, and so like I'm a big person in personal expression. I don't know that I'm all that personally expressive, but I want people to kind of be who they are. I always tell that to my daughter. That's a city where like everybody is who they are, and that's cool. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of the people, and so like everybody kind of had their own style. Everybody kind of dressed the way they wanted to. Everybody kind of acted the way they wanted. Everybody kind of let everybody be. There wasn't a bunch of sirens and like you'd see in a major American city. There wasn't a bunch of cars. There wasn't 9-lane highways. I like that stuff. I like when you take those things out of the element and you just kind of you force people to walk around for 4 miles. I think people get along better when they have to do that sometimes.
So the week ended with Nebraska making its own personal expression on the field, and maybe that's not what we were looking for. Like, where do you start with that? Because, I mean, obviously it continues the narrative, another one-score loss, another situation where they make mistakes, but, like, 2 plays go the other way and Nebraska wins that game. Isn't what we're talking about...
If they don't have the onside kick, they win the game, I think. I really believe that.
And so isn't what we're talking about, wouldn't that be a lot different? Like if 2 plays went the other way, like we're not probably dissecting the weaknesses from that game, but we're talking about what they did well to finish it. Like it just feels like the conversation for this team hinges every week on a couple plays. It did last year, and it's going to now.
Between winning and losing.
No, I know, but like they lose the game, and it feels like the sky is falling.
Yeah,
they win the game, but like the difference is so minute. I don't know, like.
I get what you're saying. So, for example, let's go back to 2007. Nebraska in 2007 starts the season 2-0, right? They beat Nevada by a bunch. Then they go down to Wake, and they barely beat Wake. You were there, weren't you?
I was there.
Yeah. Well, Wake wasn't a bad team. They were coming off an Orange Bowl, and Nebraska beat them, 2017 or something like that. But you kind of knew watching the game, this team's going to struggle. Nebraska's going to have problems because this wasn't a very good performance.
That's
they
right.
won. But you're like, it took a Zach Bowman interception late. This game at Northwestern was kind of like that. It was like if they'd won the game, I think Eric Chenander still feels the same way. Like, well, we were lucky to win, but man, do we have a lot of stuff to fix. On the offense, I think there's far less Sturm and Drang. Like there way too much was made of the play calling stuff. Amy asked a great question of Scott. Again, it's like second or third time she's done that, where she just asks a question of him, and then he just goes in a direction that he didn't need to go in. And he brought up the thing about the play calling being tough and needing to cooperate, and it just makes it sound like it was worse than it was. So, yeah, I think we would feel differently, but there's still enough concerns.
No doubt.
That game played out in a way that is concerning because Nebraska dazzled early, throwing the football around. Mm-hmm. Guess what? That happens a lot. A lot of college football teams can throw it around the yard for the first quarter and a half, especially when they're fresh. Then a defense starts to figure that out. And by the end of that game, Northwestern had figured Nebraska out.
They had.
And they weren't going to be able to just throw the ball all over the yard. And they couldn't run it. The flip side of the story was true the other way. Northwestern could run the ball. Nebraska knew they were going to run the ball, and they couldn't stop them. That's football. And that's the thing that's concerning going forward, is that at the end of that game, Northwestern was the better team physically. I still think Nebraska wins the game if they don't kick an onside kick. I think Northwestern runs out of time. But maybe the lesson that Nebraska gets because they tried the onside kick is that they've got to get a hell of a lot better and really, really fast in the physicality part.
Which side do you think is more concerning, the offensive line of scrimmage for Nebraska or the defensive line of scrimmage from what you saw going forward? Which side of the ball is more concerning?
The defensive side. Because if you can't stop the run, you're at the mercy of almost every team you play. You know, like if you can't stop the run. If you can't run the ball, well, you sure as hell can throw it. You can. You can throw it around. I mean, there's ways. It isn't always very picturesque, but Washington State used to do it, and now Mississippi State does it. You can do it. It's possible. And Mark Whipple's got all the schemes to make it possible, if that makes sense. There were games where Nebraska couldn't run the ball worth you-know-what in the Bill Callahan era, but Zach Taylor threw for 400 yards and they won. But if you can't stop the run, there's not much you can do. And so I would say that the more concerning aspect is that front seven did not appear ready to stop Northwestern's run game, much less another team.
I think in general I agree with that, but for this particular team, to me it's more the run stopping because it feels like there's something they can do about it on the defensive side. They talked about needing more reps for Stephon Wynn and Devin Drew, and like there are other bodies that you can put in there. You can kind of say, okay, let's rotate better, let's scheme it a little bit better. The offensive line, like, kind of is what it is. What are you going to do? Like, put in somebody who hasn't really been a factor through fall camp. I don't know. I think the O-line kind of is what it is. You have to hope that they coalesce, come together, figure it out. Whereas I just feel like on the defensive side, you can finagle things a little bit more. And the pass rush thing, while concerning, part of me too is just like Northwestern played so conservatively that it didn't give Nebraska as many chances to come after the quarterback. I mean, on 2 occasions, 3rd and long, and they run the ball to set up a field goal. Those are situations against other teams like Oklahoma where those teams are going to pass, and maybe that's
like
when
Minnesota.
Right, they did.
Played like Illinois. I mean, you can call it conservative, but what it is winning.
And it's letting Nebraska make the mistakes.
And it's leveraging Nebraska. Nebraska is not a big team. They're not a big team. Not on defense, they're not. They are in the secondary, but they're not a big team up front. And so, Colton Feast is 6'2" and 280. That's not big. No, you don't have to be big. Best player in the NFL is Aaron Donald. He's not big. But you better be really damn good if you're not big. And you'd better be really quick, and you better have a system that takes advantage of quickness, and Colton Feast isn't Aaron Donald. So I would say that I'm more concerned about the defensive side of it. We'll see what they do and what answers they come up with. I think they've got to get more rotation in there. I'm still not sure that they're big enough. I just don't know. Devin Drew's not a big guy. He's not small, but he's not big. And Wynn is pretty big, but he didn't look huge out there. So on the offensive side of the ball, there's a couple interior alignment, and they do a little bit better job of walling people off. And then I think they need to think about how they want to pull their pulling scheme, because they did a lot of pull to the left, running off left tackle, pulling Brock Bando over, trying to get an advantage on that side. I just wondered what it'd look like if you swapped Bando and Turner Corcoran, and you had Turner on the move on that right side, pulling. That's just me, though.
Yeah.
Or maybe you pull to the right. There's some things maybe they can work on where they can get some different guys on the move. Brock is a strong guy, just maybe not the fastest guy on a pull.
How much weight do you put on the fact that it was the first game for so many new pieces coming together, right? Like, these coaches are seeing so many of their players in action for the first time. These players are playing together for the first time. Like, how much grace are you willing to kind of put out there that this will sort of smooth out over the course of the next couple weeks leading up to that Oklahoma game?
Quite a bit. Yeah, quite a bit of grace. Yep. I would say that I would give it more than I would have last year.
Sure.
It was disappointing last season. They go and play Illinois, and they look, first of all, they didn't look like they were weaker. They didn't look weaker than Illinois, but they looked like they didn't know what the hell they were doing for a lot of that game. And they looked discombobulated and unprepared. That wasn't the case on Saturday. I didn't think Nebraska looked unprepared. I think they struggled a little bit with some of the things that Northwestern did offensively. But some of that it was because they were in that position for the first time. But I didn't think they looked unprepared. I just think they looked like a team that, quite frankly, had not recruited well enough and was relying on transfers on defense to get things done. And they just didn't look very athletic or big. I thought on offense, the players that they added to the team looked like pretty good football players. I think Casey Thompson looked okay.
Yeah.
Better than average, as Whipple said. I thought Marcus Washington looked pretty good. I thought Trey Palmer, he's got to fight a little bit more for the ball. There were a couple drops there that he shouldn't have dropped the ball. He's got to be able to take more contact and be more physical. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda is a good football player. I don't give a crap. Like that guy, he's not Oliver Martin. He's not. And I'm not trying to knock Oliver, but Oliver had a big game last year in the season opener, and we got all over that. This is not that. Garcia Castaneda's got some toughness, and he's got to move. When you throw him the football, he can actually do something, after the catch. They got a good player there. And so the newcomers, and Anthony Grant is, I think, a pretty good player too.
Mm-hmm.
You see the move he made on the catch.
Yes.
That was pretty good. And the one on the touchdown run was too. He needs space, but if he gets it, I think he's pretty good. So I think the guys they added on the offense look like better football players to me than maybe some they added on the defense, although Tommy Hill, I think, is going to be a good player. But we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. And the psychology aspect to me is really interesting. And we talked about it at Big Red Breakfast a little this morning, this idea that, like, you saw it in the post game when Garrett Nelson's out there, and you can tell he's just been punched in the gut. Like, again, here we go again. And, like, at the end
he's got to get past that.
Well, I know he does, but and that's what he said. He said, I'm not doing a good job of, holding a good posture right now, keeping my head up. And Casey Thompson, first game at Nebraska, is sitting right there.
Well,
and to me, I wish Jimmy were here right now because I'm going to use a blackjack analogy. It's like when you're sitting at a blackjack table and you've had bad beat after bad beat, and you're getting frustrated, man, because you're playing it correctly, and the result's not going your way for whatever reason.
Sure.
And then some new guy comes and sits down at the table and says, "How's it going?" And everyone says, "This table is ice cold, man." And he sits down, and the first bad beat that he takes, okay, it's one.
That's right.
It's going to be fine.
That's right.
And I think that's exactly what it is. Nebraska's, it's like they've been at a cold blackjack table. These transfers come in, and after one bad beat, they're like, we'll be all right. We'll figure this out. We've prepared. We know what we're doing. And so I'll be curious how that manifests as the year goes on, because at some point it's everyone kind of shares that experience again, one way or the other. And can those guys sort of pull them out of the bad headspace that some of them clearly are in, or do they get dragged down into this idea that, like, well, we lose these games sooner or later, that other shoe's going to drop, as you said.
I think to some degree they mirrored their coach. So I think Garrett Nelson is mirroring his head coach and his defensive coordinator, and I think Casey Thompson's mirroring his offensive coordinator.
Sure.
Who is his coach?
Yeah, new guy to the program.
Scott's his coach, but Mark Whipple's his coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I'm sure Garrett will have a different approach the next time they lose. But I thought the approach he had of coming on out and then kind of stroking his chin and, the deep sort of, again, that stuff about how everybody makes fun of the Adrian or the professor and all that all plays well at media days, but it doesn't win you any games. And that chip on the shoulder, this isn't fair, X, Y, Z, those are things that, leadership is challenging, and you can't. It's hard to lead, and I think about this for myself. Like, it's hard to lead seeming defeated or over juicing the emotion. And I know they want to get to an emotional pitch. I get that, but you know what? Winning football games in the fourth quarter really isn't about, it's not about that. It's not about It's not that rage. It's about focus. It's about dialing in, and it's about executing. And there's violence in that because football is a violent sport, but it's not. You actually have to find a place for your emotions to go, that channel them in a way that isn't, isn't that. And Nebraska volleyball player Whitney Lowenstein was talking about this. She's had a good start to the season, and she said, last year I was like that. I was like, I was very emotional on the court, and of course they have a great team. So, so she got benched because there are other players who can, work through that. She didn't get benched, but she didn't play as much. And I think what she did over the summer is she kind of embraced a new role, and she was going to be an opposite hitter, and that's where. And she's like, I've worked on becoming an assassin, as she said. I've worked on a mindset that's going to keep me quiet and calm, and then I'm going to attack. And what they've worked on her with is actually keeping the emotions in check and channeling them. And Nebraska can't fall apart emotionally like that. They have to find a way to stay dialed in. And I think one of the challenges they've had, especially in fourth quarters, is they just kind of lose lose the machinery that was keeping them going, which is why I think the onside kick was not a good decision, because what you want to do there is kick the football off and say, you know what, guys, we just scored 2 in a row. Let's go get another stop. Let's not do anything to mess up the rhythm we're in or even risk it. Let's go out and get another stop. Then we'll put another touchdown on the board. There's going to be 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and this game is over. It was like, no, we got to end it now. We got to end the game now. It's like at a blackjack table deciding to double down in a moment when you don't need to double down.
Right.
You're way up, and you want to get way, way up. And it costs.
Yeah, no doubt. So where does this go the next 2 weeks? Like, what can happen with North Dakota, with Georgia Southern, that will change anything about the outlook of the Nebraska-Oklahoma game? Or is it just don't lose, and then the season sort of feels like it comes down to that early in the year? What could happen?
What do you think could happen? What do you think they could do?
Well, I think this sort of becomes that NFL preseason thing that Eric Chenander talked about, where if college athletics and college football really has become like this free agency sort of deal, then you need some time, some live reps to get these guys on the same page, and they didn't have that in the opener. And Northwestern was a much more depth-oriented, continuous program than Nebraska has been, and I think that shows up in that first game when the lights come on. And so, obviously, barring some sort of upset loss, like that to me is what it's about, is figure out your rotation. What do you want to do with your running backs? What's your defensive line rotation look like?
They'll figure that part out.
That's the kind of thing that you need to get figured out in these next 2 weeks, so that by the time you go into Oklahoma, you have a little bit more of an identity, right? We talk about that all the time over the years, about like what's the identity of Nebraska, especially on offense. And, I think we got a little bit better sense of what that could be from this opener under this offensive coordinator. But like, let's see that the next 2 weeks some more. What does this look like? What do they do well? What's their bread and butter under this system? What's game day communication like among coaches in a normal setting in the United States? Like, that to me is what it's all about. And certainly, you don't want to be in a one-score game in the fourth quarter these next 2 weeks. Those would be major red flags.
This week.
You think so?
Possible. Yes.
And I get that it's not about style points this year, right? Like, it's about win the games. But that to me is the value of these next 2 weeks at home with Oklahoma coming in. Figure yourself out.
Yeah.
Because you just haven't had a lot of opportunity to do it.
You go back to 2005 season opener against Maine. Zach Taylor was a quarterback. They struggled. Mm-hmm. They won 21-6, I think. There's a real chance that it's a clunker and that they struggle. Especially with the things that the defense has brought onto the table. North Dakota, if they can move the ball, this could be a problem. And Nebraska's got to find a way to make some plays behind the line of scrimmage. Like, I think they're going to win the next 2 games, Evan, but I think that the issue with the defense is pretty concerning. They have 2 corners, man, and they have 2 safeties.
Well, if that's the case,
and here's how we know. Northwestern scores, Danny Navarro beats Braxton Clark to the inside the minute Braxton Clark came in the game. Omar Brown has a bust. Northwestern scores another passing touchdown on that. Well, those guys only played a handful of snaps, and those are the number 3 and the number 3 corner and the number 3 safety.
Mm-hmm.
They got 2 corners and 2 safeties right now. Those guys can't get hurt. They got 2 inside linebackers.
Yeah, you can say that at a lot of positions.
That's
can't
about
get hurt.
all they got. I mean,
one tight end.
Clemens played okay. Houseman actually got pretty good grades on the Pro Football Focus, which we're going to do more of this year. But I mean, that's because he's just out there in space and he's not touching anybody because he's just floating. But they got 2 inside linebackers. Conversely, they ought to have 5 edge rushers, and they only played 3. They need to find a way to get Blaise Gunnerson on the field. I think they've got 4 or 5 interior linemen, but they need to find a way to get Devin Drew as a starter. I mean, they just don't have great depth. Or they have depth and they didn't play him. I don't know. They have 2 nickels, and I don't think either one of them is as good as JoJo Doman by some margin.
Right.
And I don't know. It's just the thing that I regret, and I probably do this every year. We shouldn't have played it. That defense, the guys on that defense, and honestly the coaches too, they didn't sound a note of caution or warning or alarm as much as they probably should have. They're missing the players they had last year. After last season, if you had asked both of us, what is a concern going into 2022, we would have mentioned Doman and Cam.
Damian
and
Daniels.
And Stilly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they got a lot to replace. Somehow in that process, and we didn't do a good enough job. I didn't do a good enough job of saying, wait a minute now. Why are we buying that they're just going to suddenly become good at this? And O'Shawn Mathis is a legitimate answer to that question. Tommy Hill is a pretty good corner, but Caleb Tanner hasn't gotten to the quarterback in 4 years.
Right.
I mean, he hasn't. Has he, Evan?
Not really, no.
So this has been an issue for a while. And some people thought that was a great press conference on Tuesday from him. I thought it was interesting. We'll see if it pans out. So one of your leaders is, super fired up before the game, despondent after the game, doesn't talk this week. Another one of your defensive leaders, has a very emotional and passionate speech, but it's mostly about effort, and I don't think they weren't playing hard. And Chinander yesterday was like, yeah, I appreciated what he said, but simultaneously it's not on one guy. Like, you want your leaders to parrot what the coaches think. Flip side of the coin, Casey Thompson sounds like exactly the kind of guy you want doing that. And I know he may not be the easiest guy to deal with because he's very detailed and he wants things just so, but that's kind of who you want your quarterback to be. You kind of want him to be that guy. So it just feels like the vibe on offense is better than the vibe on defense. And I felt like that going into the offseason, but then I switched it. And I probably shouldn't have.
Well, I think I put a lot of stock, maybe too much stock, in the continuity on that side of the ball and like the value of that, of Eric Chinander being here for a 5th year. And so like you talk about these guys who are stepping into a larger role. I mean, Miles Farmer's dabbled with starts the last couple of years. He's a full-time guy. Marquise Buford's been in the system for a couple of years. You can kind of go down the line with some of those, but yeah, I mean, it felt discombobulated. It reminded me of the early years of Frost, 2018 and 2019, when
But they had better players then. See, that's my concern.
I suppose.
I think they did.
So maybe the talent's less, but the busts are what they were. I thought that transition would be smoother because, again, like the guys that are starting now had that extra year to learn under a lot of those 6th-year guys or 5th-year guys who were in the program longer. And so Nebraska benefited on the field, and I just thought that would carry over, and at least through one game, it just
Maybe they
didn't
did have
happen.
better players in 2018. I don't know. They had Carlos and Khalil Davis. They had Mick Stoltenberg. They had Luke Gifford.
Moberry.
And right now, Luke Gifford's better than any of their edge rushers. He is. Based on that one game, he's better. You liked the picture back then at safety. Trey Neal, Antonio Reed, Aaron Williams. Your corners were Lamar Jackson and DiCaprio.
Yeah.
Inside linebackers were Colin Miller and Mo Berry. And maybe Dedrick Young. I don't know, maybe. I think he was on that team.
17, I think maybe was his last year. But yeah.
Maybe. No, Dietrich's first year was 2015. I'm pretty certain of that.
All right.
I don't know. I actually kind of think they had better players that year. I know it sounds a little whatever, but yeah, I think they might have had better players. I don't know, Evan. I think it's right to be concerned about that defense. Maybe not the next 2 weeks, but
Well, look, you don't have to look far. You don't have to look far back in Husker history to see that these so-called easier non-con games are where the red flags come out. You think of Arkansas State in 2017. You're calling back mid-2000s, Ball State, 2007 when they give up 40. I think those are all examples of that. So, again, like at this point, you just got to win the games, right? Like you're just talking about getting 6 wins, making a bowl game, and seeing what happens from there, building up some kind of continuity. We'll see if they can do it.
Makamoladun.
Yeah.
Mohamed Barry, Dedrick Young, Aaron Williams. I don't know, man. I feel like that group is better than, at least at the moment. Like, I don't know. Maybe they're better at corner now. I don't think they are. So anyway, I'm a little concerned about that defense. That would be my thought process.
Okay.
That would be my my hot take.
Yeah. All right. Well, you got to win the lines of scrimmage, man. How long have we been talking about that? Like year after year after year.
Too long, Evan.
And it's the same. It's the same. It feels like it's going to be the same again, but we'll see. Do we have picks?
We do.
Let's do some picks. Oh, and we got a fantasy update from Jimmy.
Yeah. Do you want to read those off?
Yes. So we had our fantasy draft a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, sure, I'll read them because Sam has a commanding lead after week 1. He has 56 points. He had a big week from Anthony Grant. He had Isaiah Garcia Castaneda and Luke Reimer, who was the leading tackler. So he has,
now, we have other guys. They just didn't do anything.
those were the highlights.
I had Borkircher and somebody else.
Jimmy, with less than half of that, is next. 25.2 points. His best player was Trey Palmer, 10.8. He got 10 from Mathis. And then 4.4 from Brody Belt and Jaquez Yant. I was on my way to a monster day before Vokalek got hurt. He finishes with 8.8 points as my leader. Alante Brown, Marcus Washington combined for 8.4. Got 5 from Tommy Hill and a fraction of a point from A.J. Allen, who got a few carries as well.
What you did is you've got some volume there, so you're just going to have to win on volume. Because I think Anthony Grant is going to be more productive than A.J. Allen.
Sure.
And I think IGC is going to be more productive than Alante Brown. Brown was the starter, but anyway. I think Marcus Washington will have better games. I really do.
I do too.
Trey Palmer could have had a better game. He had a couple drops, and then he was overthrown on a third quarter play action pass, very similar to the one Adrian missed last year to Samari Toure. Thompson just missed him, and he missed Palmer, and if he hadn't wanted to throw to Palmer, he could have thrown to Alante Brown for about 25 in the middle of the field. There were open guys all game long until that fourth quarter. Then it tightened up a little bit. But, I'm in the lead so far.
All right, you got that one. Let's do the picks. I think I don't know how many years in a row I've won these, but we're tweaking it this year, right?
You have won 3 years in a row because I allowed you to pick the 2019
LSU
national title game.
Yeah.
We were tied.
Right.
I made this miraculous comeback in the bowls where I usually gain ground, and we tied. But then I let you pick LSU.
Yeah.
Then you won convincingly in 2020, and I think you won last year by some margin.
But see, your strategy is...
I'm changing the strategy.
I'm sure. You should.
However, this first week is actually kind of tricky. Like, there's games where...
So you
good luck knowing who's going to win.
If I can impart some coaching wisdom here, you get bored with success. Like you feel like you have to kind of go out on a limb and pick the upsets. So you're like Wisconsin, who runs it, and says, I'm going to throw some passes.
That's right.
We'll see if you stick to the run this year.
I'm just going to pick the teams I think are going to win.
Okay.
That's how I'm going to do it.
All right.
Okay, and we'll see how it goes.
Love it.
Purdue, Penn State.
Man, what a fun game tonight. Penn State.
I'll take Purdue. And we'll get Jimmy's picks later. Illinois, Indiana.
Another interesting one. I'm going to take Illinois.
I'm taking Illinois as well. TCU, Colorado. I will take TCU.
Yeah, same.
Iowa, South Dakota State. I will take Iowa, but I think it's a good game.
Iowa.
Georgia, Oregon. In somewhere. It's a neutral. Atlanta, somewhere.
Intriguing game, intriguing storyline with Lanning. I'll take Georgia.
I'll take Georgia as well. West Virginia, Pittsburgh, the backyard brawl. Do you remember the backyard brawl as a kid?
It didn't really do much for me.
Yeah.
Not really.
Craig Ironhead Hayward against Major Harris.
Love the names.
Yeah. You don't remember? That was like 1988.
Yeah. I was 2. Give me Pitt.
Pitt? I will take Pitt too. See? We're roughly the same so far. Cincinnati at Arkansas.
Another fun one.
Yeah.
Cincinnati lost a lot last year.
Well, they
from
did.
last year, yeah.
Lost
yeah,
both
yeah.
their corners and quarterback and other
Yeah.
corners.
Got to go with the SEC team in the opener.
So do I. Utah, Florida.
Fun one, too.
Mm-hmm.
Give me Utah.
Utah for me too. See, I'm picking the teams I want to win.
Look at
and I
you.
think are going to win. I'm not going to.
Okay.
I'm not going to try to play clever. Rutgers at Boston College. I'll take BC.
Yeah, same.
Florida State, LSU. Din, 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 din.
God, those are two such volatile programs the last couple of years.
Yeah, they are.
I have more faith in LSU. Brian Kelly. Tigers.
First time we disagree. Florida State.
Okay.
The game's at Florida State. I don't know. I actually think they got a good coach. I think they're going to figure it out. Notre Dame, Ohio State.
I don't know that this is particularly close. I think Ohio State
Agreed.
runs it up.
I think Notre Dame has question marks at a variety of spots. I think by the end of the year they're going to be a really good team, but right away it's a hard game out of the box. Okay, and then 22.5 is the number. Nebraska, North Dakota. We're going to do point spreads on Nebraska. So that may at times be win-loss, but in this particular case, Nebraska's a 22.5 point favorite. Who do you take?
I take Nebraska to win, but not to cover.
So UND, cover. I will take North Dakota to cover too. See? This is what it's going to look like.
Look
Me
at
picking
us.
Teams I want to win every week that I think are going to win.
That's fine. We had a couple differences.
We had one difference.
No, you said Purdue, right? I said Penn State.
Purdue and Penn State, and Florida State, LSU. Those are the two differences, and you're
all right.
playing them both. And then we'll ask this of Jimmy and see how he wants to play it. We won't tell him who we picked.
Yeah.
He'll just have to do it without the knowledge of trying to play us. He's not very good at blackjack anyway.
That's right. Well, we'll be back next week with Jimmy, I imagine. Maybe Tom. You never know. So we got the start of a nice little home stretch here for Nebraska. We'll see if they can even things out ahead of that big Oklahoma game here in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening. For Sam, I'm Evan. Talk to you later.
Thank you.